Claire sat at the far end of the dining table, her hands resting in her lap, trying to stay invisible. The room was warm with the sound of clinking glasses and the smell of roasted meat, but Claire felt cold. Marcus, her husband, sat at the head of the table, talking loudly, laughing with his relatives. His voice carried a sharp edge that only she seemed to notice. When she quietly stood to refill the wine, Marcus smirked. "See," he said to his cousin. "Claire's basically the servant in this house. Always running around after us." The table went quiet for a beat, before someone gave a nervous laugh. Another joined in. Evelyn, Marcus's mother, smiled approvingly as if it were true. Claire froze, the bottle still in her hand. She forced a small smile, willing herself not to show how deeply it hurt. She had given up her career, her family dinners, even her own ambitions to make this house a home for Marcus. She had been there through his late nights in law school, his endless stress, his first big case, his every win and loss. Marcus didn't look at her. He just kept talking, waving a dismissive hand as if she were part of the furniture. "She doesn't mind," he said casually. "She likes keeping busy." Inside, Claire felt her chest tighten. She wanted to speak, to say something sharp that would make him stop, but her throat felt closed. The laughter started again, soft and awkward, bouncing around the table like knives. She poured the wine carefully, her hands steady though her heart was racing. When she sat down again, she kept her eyes on her plate. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Marcus bragging about work, his relatives nodding. Evelyn talking about how lucky Claire was to have such a successful husband. Lucky. The word felt like a slap. Claire nodded when spoken to, smiled when expected, and stayed silent the rest of the evening. Every word Marcus said reminded her how small she had become in her own home. Later, when everyone left and the house was quiet, Claire cleared the table alone. She stacked the plates, wiped the crumbs, and listened to the sound of Marcus's laughter from the other room as he spoke on the phone. She wondered if this was how the rest of her life would feel. Quiet, lonely, and invisible. She pressed her palm against the table and stood very still, swallowing hard. Her whole body wanted to cry, but she didn't. She had learned long ago to keep it inside. But something felt different tonight. The words Marcus had said wouldn't leave her mind. Just a servant in this house. They echoed over and over until they felt like they were burning into her. She didn't know what she would do yet, but for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her. Something that was tired of being silent. Once a bright, ambitious woman, Claire used to dream of becoming a lawyer. She loved books, debates, and late-night study sessions, imagining herself one day standing in a courtroom, defending someone who had no one else to fight for them. When she met Marcus, he seemed to love that about her. Her fire, her passion, her sharp mind. Back then, Marcus was different. He was kind, charming, and endlessly grateful for her support. He would tell her that she was his rock, that he couldn't have made it through law school without her. Claire believed him. She believed in them. So when money became tight, she was the one who stepped back from her studies. Just for a little while, she had told herself. She worked long hours, cooked dinners late at night, and kept their small apartment running while Marcus focused on classes, internships, and building his future. At first he thanked her for everything. He promised that when his career took off, things would get easier. But as the years passed and his success grew, the man she once knew began to fade. Marcus started coming home later, too tired to talk, too busy to notice her quiet efforts. He began to speak differently, his words sharper, as if her thoughts mattered less and less. By the time he made partner at the firm, Claire barely recognized herself. She was no longer the ambitious young woman who had once had plans of her own. She had become someone who lived around Marcus's schedule, someone who kept the house spotless and the meals ready, who planned everything around his needs. His mother, Evelyn, made it worse. Evelyn always told Claire how lucky she was to have Marcus, how many women would envy her position. "You should be proud of him," Evelyn would say with a knowing smile. "He provides everything for you. You don't need to work." At first, Claire tried to ignore her. But over time, those words began to sink in, leaving her unsure of her own worth. The only person who seemed to truly see her was Julia, her best friend. Julia was blunt and fierce. The kind of friend who would grab Claire by the shoulders and remind her that she was still a person, not just a shadow in Marcus's house. Julia urged her to go back to school, to start something for herself, but Claire always found reasons not to. there was always another case, another business dinner, another excuse to put it off. And then there was Lily. At 12, she was sharp-eyed and sensitive, noticing far more than Claire wished she would. Sometimes Lily would ask quiet questions like, "Mom, why does Dad talk to you like that?" Or "Are you okay?" Claire would always smile and say she was fine, even when she wasn't. Claire stayed because of Lily, because she wanted her daughter to grow up with both parents in the same home. She told herself she could endure anything if it meant giving Lily a stable life, but little by little, that choice left Claire feeling trapped. She had no job, no savings of her own, and no real say in the decisions Marcus made. Even small things, like what school Lily should attend or how they spent holidays, were decided without her. Her world had grown small and quiet. Days blurred into each other. Cooking, cleaning, hosting dinners for Marcus's colleagues, smiling politely while they talked about cases she no longer had the energy to follow. At night she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how her life had turned into this. Marcus no longer saw her as an equal. He treated her kindness like a duty, her sacrifices like something he was owed. He had gone from the man who once held her face in his hands and told her she was brilliant, to the man who dismissed her in front of his relatives and called her a servant. Claire felt the walls closing in around her. She was isolated, financially dependent, and unsure how to change anything without risking everything. The thought of leaving terrified her. The thought of staying did too. Marcus's wealthy uncle passed away on a quiet Thursday morning. The news came with little emotion from Marcus. He only muttered, "About time," before calling his office to say he would be gone for the funeral. Claire felt a pang of sadness. She remembered the uncle as a kind man, someone who had once asked about her dreams and listened when she told him she used to want to study law. He had smiled and said, "The world could use more people like you." The day of the funeral was gray and cold. Claire dressed simply, keeping her head low as they arrived at the church. Marcus walked ahead, greeting relatives with a tight smile, shaking hands, already acting as though the day belonged to him. Throughout the service, Claire sat quietly beside Lily, her hands clasped together. She felt the weight of every glance from Marcus's family, who always looked at her as though she was just an extra piece of furniture Marcus had dragged in. After the service, the family gathered at the uncle's large old house. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and dust. Whispers floated through the air, hushed voices, curious tones. "They say the will is unusual," someone murmured near the doorway. "Marcus will probably get everything," another replied. He was the favorite. Marcus seemed to agree. He moved through the room with a confidence that made Claire feel invisible. She overheard him talking to a cousin near the fireplace. "Of course I'll be the one to handle the estate," Marcus said with a small laugh. "Claire doesn't need a penny. She's already taken care of." Claire's chest tightened. The words stung more than she expected. Doesn't need a penny. As though all the years she had spent supporting him meant nothing. As though she had no right to anything at all. She stayed near the edge of the room, silent, pretending not to hear. But the words stayed with her, echoing inside her head. When the family lawyer, Mr. Harris, arrived, the room grew quiet. He was an older man with kind eyes and a slow, steady voice. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "The will reading will be private. Only a few people are required to attend." He read a short list of names. When he said Claire Bennett, the room stirred. A few relatives exchanged puzzled looks. Evelyn frowned, clearly displeased. Marcus turned sharply toward Claire. "That's not necessary," he said quickly, his voice tight. "She doesn't need to be involved." Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid she must be present," he replied calmly. "The will cannot be read without her." The room went silent. Claire felt every eye turn toward her. She swallowed, unsure why her name had been mentioned at all. Marcus forced a smile, but his jaw was tense. "Fine," he said through his teeth. "We'll be there." Later, as they drove home, Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Don't get any ideas," he said without looking at her. "This is just a formality. You sit there, stay quiet, and don't embarrass me." Claire stared out the window, her heart pounding. Something about the way Mr. Harris had insisted on her presence made her uneasy and curious. Why did the will require her? What had the uncle done that Marcus didn't want her to know? For the first time in a long while, Claire felt a flicker of something new. Not just pain or sadness, but a quiet spark of anticipation. Marcus grew more cruel in the days before the will reading. He barely spoke to Claire except to remind her not to make a scene. At breakfast, he would sit with his phone, scrolling through emails before snapping. Don't think this changes anything. Whatever Harris is planning, it's just paperwork. One night, as Claire folded laundry, Marcus stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You don't need to go, he said sharply. I can handle this myself. Claire didn't look up. Mr. Harris said I have to be there. You're enjoying this, aren't you? His voice was low and dangerous. You've always been ungrateful. I gave you this life, Claire, and now you're acting like you deserve more. Her hands trembled as she folded Lily's sweater, but she kept her voice steady. I'm just following what the lawyer said. Marcus stepped closer, his shadow long across the floor. You sit quietly at that reading. You don't speak unless you're spoken to. Do you understand? She nodded, but inside something cracked. The next morning, she called Julia. Her friend didn't even let her finish explaining. Claire, listen to me, Julia said. This might be the first time in years you've been given a chance to have a say in anything. Don't let him scare you into staying quiet. Claire sighed, sitting at the edge of the bed. He's furious, Jules. You should have seen his face. Of course he's furious, Julia said gently. He's afraid. That's what this is about. Afraid of losing control. That's why you have to go. Later that night, Claire found Lily sitting at the kitchen table drawing. The little girl looked up and asked quietly, Mom, why is Dad so mad at you? Claire knelt beside her. He's just worried, she said softly. About what? Lily pressed. Claire hesitated, then brushed a piece of hair from her daughter's face. About things changing. Lily frowned. I don't like when he yells at you. Claire swallowed hard. I don't either, she whispered. That night, lying awake, Claire remembered all the little moments that had brought her here. The time she found bank statements showing Marcus had moved money into an account she didn't know about. The time he laughed at her when she mentioned maybe taking classes again, saying, At your age? Don't embarrass yourself. The Christmas he decided without asking her that they would spend the holidays with his mother instead of visiting Claire's family. And called her overly emotional when she cried about it. Every memory stacked on top of the other, until she felt like she could barely breathe. 2 days later, Evelyn came over. She sat on the couch with her perfect posture, sipping tea, her sharp eyes fixed on Claire. You don't need to be involved in this, she said. This is a family matter. I am family, Claire said quietly. Evelyn gave a short, cold laugh. You married into this family. That doesn't mean you get to have a say in how we handle our legacy. Claire said nothing, but Evelyn's words stayed with her long after she left. When Mr. Harris called to confirm the will reading, Claire hesitated, glancing at Marcus across the room. I'll be there, she said finally. Good, Harris replied. It's legally required that you attend. Marcus's head snapped up at that. You could have rescheduled, he hissed after she hung up. It's the lawyer's schedule, she said quietly. Marcus slammed his fist against the table, making the dishes rattle. You think you're clever? You think you can humiliate me in front of my family? Claire flinched but stayed where she was. I just want to know what's in the will. That's my business, he shouted. You wouldn't even have a roof over your head if it wasn't for me. The argument spiraled, louder and louder, until Lily appeared in the doorway, frightened. Claire turned to her daughter, and saw tears in her eyes. That was when something inside Claire shifted. She turned back to Marcus, her voice calm but firm. I'm going to that reading, Marcus, and I won't stay silent anymore. He stared at her as though he didn't recognize her. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of their breathing. Then Marcus grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. Claire stood in the silence that followed, her hands shaking. She was terrified, but for the first time, she felt stronger than her fear. The uncle left the majority of his estate to Claire. The words hung in the air like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Everyone stared at her. Claire sat frozen, her hands clasped in her lap, not sure if she had heard correctly. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses and continued reading. Mr. Bennet wished to leave the family home, the majority of his savings, and his personal accounts to Claire Bennet, in recognition of her loyalty, kindness, and the care she showed him in the last years of his life. Claire felt her breath catch. She remembered those visits, making soup for the uncle when Marcus was too busy with clients, sitting with him and listening to his stories, helping him sort his medication. She hadn't done it for any reason other than kindness. Marcus's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood up. "This is ridiculous," he said sharply. She must have talked him into this. She manipulated him. Mr. Harris shook his head calmly. "Your uncle made this decision entirely on his own. He told me personally that he was disappointed in how you had changed, Marcus. He said you cared more about winning cases and making money than you did about family." Marcus's face went pale then red. "That's not true," he said, but his voice wavered. "It is true," Harris said evenly. "He told me Claire was the only one who showed him kindness when he needed it. That's why he wanted her to have control over his estate. It was his wish." Evelyn gasped. "This is an insult to our family name." Claire turned to look at her slowly, her voice quiet but steady. "He was family to me too." Marcus pointed a finger at her. "You think this makes you better than me? You've lived off me for years, Claire. Don't pretend you earned this." Claire stood, her knees shaking but her back straight. "I earned this by being there when he needed someone. I earned it by caring when you wouldn't. I never asked for this, Marcus, but I won't apologize for it either." His mouth opened then closed again. He had no answer. "You treated me like a servant in my own home," Claire said, her voice gaining strength. "I was never your servant. I was your wife, but you chose to forget that." The room was silent. Even Evelyn didn't speak. Marcus sank back into his chair, staring at the table. For the first time, he looked small, like the weight of everything he had done was finally pressing down on him. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "There is one final note from your uncle," he said, pulling out a handwritten letter. "He asked me to tell you, Marcus, that this was not meant to punish you, but to remind you of what truly matters. He hoped this would make you see the people who have stood by you." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Claire felt her chest rise with a shaky breath. Her hands still trembled, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She sat down slowly, holding her head high. The power in the room had shifted. For years, Marcus had made her feel small, powerless, invisible. Now she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, free. Claire doesn't gloat. Instead, she takes quiet control of her life. In the days after the will reading, she moved through the house calmly, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She met with Mr. Harris privately and arranged for a trust to be set up for Lily's future. "I want her to know she will always be taken care of," Claire said. She didn't argue with Marcus or try to explain herself. She didn't need to. He moved into the guest room, angry and distant, slamming doors and making calls late into the night. Claire stayed quiet, focusing on what came next. A week later, she signed papers that made her financially independent. For the first time in years, she had money of her own, money Marcus could not touch. It felt strange, powerful, and a little scary. Instead of spending her days waiting for Marcus to come home, Claire began doing something she had always dreamed about. She visited a local legal aid center and asked if she could volunteer. The director welcomed her warmly. Soon she was helping people with paperwork, listening to their stories, and feeling her old passion wake up inside her. At night, she would sit with Lily and tell her about her day. Lily's eyes would shine with pride. "Mom," she said one evening, "you seem happier." Claire smiled softly. "I am," she said. Word spread through Marcus's firm about what had happened. People whispered about the will, about Marcus's behavior at home, about how he had treated Claire for years. Some clients quietly moved their business elsewhere. Marcus grew more frustrated, coming home later and later, until eventually he stopped coming home at all. Evelyn tried to visit, but Claire met her at the door. "I'm not here to talk about Marcus," Claire said gently. "This is my house now, and I need peace for me and Lily." Evelyn, for once, had no sharp words. She simply turned and left. Little by little, the house felt different. Warmer. Softer. Claire replaced the heavy curtains Marcus had chosen with light, airy ones that let the sun in. She painted the kitchen a pale yellow. She started playing music while she cooked, and Lily would dance in her socks across the floor. Claire knew healing would take time. The years had left deep marks, but every day she felt a little stronger, a little more herself. She had found her voice, and she would never lose it again. Claire sits with Lily on the small couch by the window, the evening sun spilling soft light across the room. The house is quiet now, peaceful. Lily leans against her mother, holding a warm cup of tea in both hands. Mom, Lily says softly. Are we going to be okay? Claire looks down at her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a moment she thinks about everything they have been through. The silence, the shouting, the fear. Then she smiles, a real smile that reaches her eyes. For the first time in years, she says gently, yes, we'll be more than okay. Lily's face brightens, and she nods as if she believes her completely. Claire wraps an arm around her and pulls her close, holding her a little longer than usual. When Lily goes to bed, Claire stands in the hallway for a moment, looking around the house. It feels lighter now, like it finally belongs to her. She walks to the front door, opens it, and steps outside. The night air is cool against her skin. She closes her eyes and breathes deeply, then slowly shuts the door behind her. Not with anger, but with calm. The sound is soft, final, like closing the last page of a book she no longer needs to read. Claire turns toward the quiet street, the stars above her, and feels something she hasn't felt in years: freedom, dignity, the power to choose what comes next. Inside, Lily sleeps peacefully, and for the first time, Claire allows herself to imagine a future she builds on her own terms, a future full of light. Hi friends, Yellowheart thanks for staying with me till the very end. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time. Waving hand.